Good morning, good afternoon, good night. Thanks for joining us on today's podcast of Conversation and Coffee with your co-host Gary Senna, and I am Danny Vicent. Thank you for listening whenever, wherever, and however you are joining us.
Conversations and Coffee is the place where we share a cup of coffee and allow our curiosity to sit in the driver's seat and explore topics in your industry.
Everything from technology to leadership to innovation and so much more. So grab your favorite cup of coffee, sit back, laugh with us while we dive into the topics keeping you up at night.
Danny, welcome to another podcast episode of Conversations and Coffee. Tell us who we have on tonight. It sounds like an exciting topic.
We do, Gary. I mean, we're covering sports, and so I thought I would bring a bunch of sports heroes. We have Ken Martin, and Ken has some history. What I heard on the last call, he was a wide receiver, I think, or was he 4'2"? I don't remember, but Ken's on the call. And down out of Australia, we have Manny. And guys, I will let you take a moment to introduce yourselves to our audience. So if one of you wants to jump in first, by all means, jump in.
Yeah, I'll go. Ken Martin, 17 years here at Cisco, leading the sport and entertainment business that we focus on globally for the past 15 of those years. So happy to be joining you guys.
Awesome. Welcome.
Hey guys, it's Manny Spanadakis. I'm into my 14th year at Cisco, and the last 11 had the pleasure of reporting to that lovely gentleman on the other side of the screen there. Heading up our Asia Pacific, Japan and China Sports Media and Entertainment Group, reporting to Ken.
Awesome.
I don't want you guys to think that 17 years at Cisco, I don't feel like I still have a chance, with the spirit of the draft being today. I've been warming up my arm all day, just in the event that I get a call.
Just to get ready?
It could happen, So
It very well could happen. There's a lot of rumors for a lot of trade stuff out there.
That's right.
And I would appreciate right up front, since it is a little bit of a sports call, you guys be careful with your slang, because Danny, coming from a non-athletic background, may not understand.
We'll dumb it down for Danny. That's fine.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate that.
Go ahead, Danny. You want to kick us off?
Yeah. So, guys, I do have a question for you. We mentioned sports, media, and entertainment. So, before we start, why don't we level set for the audience? When we say that, what are we talking about? Are we talking leagues exclusively? What does sports, media, and entertainment mean to you guys?
Well, so it means a lot, right? Depending on, we focus mainly on the venue itself. We pride ourselves in the teams that we're able to help in these venues, but the venue itself has really been our key focus. And what I mean by that is the fans that go into these venues. How do we keep them connected? How do we keep a better experience that they can than they can get from home? But if you look at some of the trends that have transpired over the last decade or so, the fan is changed dramatically. It went from go watch the event, leave, to these venues actually trying to capture the attention of the fan in a lot of different ways, and really it's meant to monetize them. So our role when we speak of sport and entertainment, we think of the sport and entertainment venue. When we talk about adding, so why did you guys add? So you guys have been known for the Sport and Entertainment Solution Group at Cisco for the past 12, 13, 14 years. Why now are you adding the broadcast? Well, the broadcast piece is becoming so significant and has changed so much over the years that it fits into what we're doing. So we don't want to ignore the venue as a whole as we look at it as connectivity. We look at it as using it as a media platform. That broadcast piece will play a significant role. We want to make sure that everybody knows that we bring industry expertise when it comes to those solutions.
Nice. You talked about trends and the fan experience, and I would imagine that the fans are driving kind of the future of sports and media and entertainment and that experience. Are we seeing trends that are taking on global feel, or is it segmented where stuff that's happening in the U.S. maybe isn't happening down with you, Manny? What are some of the trends we're seeing?
Look, I think that human beings are human beings, and sports fans in particular are sports fans and have the same emotional connection to their team and their sport. So we're seeing very similar attributes in this theatre as well as the US. It's just that there's a bit of a lag because obviously the US led this significant digital transition in the sports, particularly in the in-venue sector. There is a uniqueness down here. For example, the whole one team, one stadium scenario doesn't exist, for example, in Australia. These venues are large venues, the largest of which is the Melbourne Cricket Ground, for example, in Australia. It holds 100,000 fans, but it has 5 anchor tenants. So imagine having a 100,000 seat stadium in New York that has 5 NFL franchises
Wow.
sharing it. So if anything, the dependency on technology and the technology's ability to engage and enable fans and to be able to digitally theme the venue, transform the venue on a Friday night, Saturday night and Sunday night for 3 different home teams. The dependency on technology is as significant, if not more, down here. But to your original question, no, we see the same common attributes and same dependencies and care abouts in this part of the world.
Awesome. So Ken, I know you and I have had conversations where the venue is not just strictly sports anymore, and a lot of these venues are looking at other avenues. Are we seeing trends along those lines? Some things that these folks are using these venues for outside of traditional sport?
Destinations of entertainment is really what it boils down to. Even your malls are being converted into entertainment districts versus a place to go and buy something at a retail store. Yeah, I mean, it's changed as a whole. How do you look, if you think about it from a monetization piece, and you think, the only way we can monetize somebody is if they're in the venue, and if we can get them to buy the merchandise and get wrapped up emotionally in the spirit of the game, and get them to make impulse buys and buy more food and drink more beer, that's the revenue streams that they're really tapping into when we talk about an in-venue experience. And so in order to do that, you've got to offer better food than they can get at the local restaurant before they come into the venue. You've got to offer connectivity that they get from home, the same experiences. And just to piggyback on the broadcast, if you think about how broadcast has changed, I mean, it's a whole new media experience that's happening. The way that people engage with sports now is through their mobile device, and it's through being connected and being able to, outside of the venue, being able to share the experience with their friends or the family. But that revenue stream as a whole, you think about trends and where the U.S. may be influencing others. In the U.S. alone, broadcast media is a $14.5 billion business.
Wow.
Globally, that's a $21.7 billion business. That's striking in its own. But if you think about the trend of where it's going, this is soon to become a 75% growth in the next 5 years. That broadcast is significant to how people consume sports. So much so that companies like Yahoo and others are changing their model with regards to how to interact with the fans or the guests in general, and they're taking some of these learnings to the teams and the venues themselves to be able to to monetize the whole experience. It's amazing to see what's happening here.
Ken, could you give a practical example of that? Because my mind is just tilt when I hear those numbers, and I hear like a Yahoo trying to do the broadcasting thing. I mean, to me, this is so incredibly insightful.
There's a couple that come to mind, and I was just reading yesterday with Prime Amazon's investment in the English Premier League last season. So I think all midweek games broadcast through Prime, streamed through over the top through Prime Amazon, and their recent announcement with the NFL for Thursday night football. You can see that rapid transition on how fans are consuming the content. This is outside of the venue, of course. And the other statistic I read yesterday, and I'm pretty sure it said 18 to 34-year-olds, there's been a 25% decrease in how much TV they watch year on year since this time last year. So when you think about the traditional broadcast, when we first started approaching teams and leagues and stadiums and government statutory authorities about the stadium upgrade, it was about how do we replicate the home broadcast experience in the stadium to give the people attending the match that same feel, because at home you can have your 100-inch HD TV with your surround sound and all that other stuff. Thankfully, our group has been part of that whole transition over the last decade, and now we're seeing the likes of Amazon Prime investing billions in picking up the broadcast rights as the, preference for consumption continues to evolve, particularly this article I read yesterday for the 18 to 34-year-olds. So Thursday night football, I understand, for NFL is going to be exclusively on Prime Amazon as of next season. So it's a significant shift. So how do you accommodate for that, for the in-venue experience as well? What do you do to accommodate and complement that? And they're the kind of conversations we're having with teams and leagues and sponsors as well.
Yeah, I mean, just on that Amazon example, I mean, look at what the Bundesliga did with Amazon Web Services, to where they're giving real-time, analytics during the course of the game and different angles of what's happening. And, like I say, the days of old, just think back a decade. It was whatever the producer wanted to broadcast to you, and that was it. Now you can log on from different devices and see different angles and see, like how fast is the ball spinning, how hard was the baseball hit. All of this thing is in real-time data at your fingertips. And that's why I say that the consumption of sports has changed dramatically. It's crazy.
It's always seemed to me that sports was on the forefront of that, of trying to figure out how to give that data that you have, or that very closeness to the game, to its fans. I would imagine, however, over the last year, with fans physically being unable to be there, that's changed. And are we seeing any trends that maybe are coming from that were unexpected, or that are coming sooner than we thought they might?
Well, and I think that's Fan 2.0, right? I mean, we've sat for a year in front of our sets and try to consume an event. And so if anybody out there thinks that, we'll just pick up where we left off in 2019, they're in for a rude awakening, right? I mean, it's just, you got to adapt with change, and you got to, offer content differently. And it really is going to evolve around keeping a fan connected while they're in the venue. Making them safe and secure, we get that, right? And that's an important piece of it. But, everything that I can do from my home now, I'm going to want to do it from the venue. And so how are you enabling those experiences to happen? That's really going to be on the top of mind of most people.
Wow. Similar down with you, Manny?
Absolutely. And I think back to when I first started and met Ken, and he came down to Sydney to interview and basically do some sort of a market review. And I'll never forget this comment. We used to heavily depend on going to retailers and large malls to ask them about, hey, how do you engage with consumers, guests? Because it's a large property, you have a large congregation of people for an extended period of time. How do you make that experience unique? And that we used to go back and look at applying the best practices into the sporting world. A decade on, I think that the reverse has happened now, and we're getting a lot of the larger retailers coming to us with the large malls saying, how do you do it at a venue? And the reason now we call it a venue, not a stadium, goes back to your original comment, because now they're not just building a stadium and a parking lot in the middle of nowhere. Right. They're surrounding it with a hotel, they're surrounding it with restaurants, an entertainment precinct, and so forth. So event day is actually that, event day. When I was growing up and I was playing soccer professionally down here, people came to watch the match. Yeah, in the 60s. People came to watch the match, right? So think about now, I mean, the match is important and we're emotionally attached to the game. However, the surrounding precinct, if you're a Lakers fan and you're going to Staples Center, you're going to go in a little bit earlier and you're going to have a meal and a drink and possibly do something else leading into the event. And then at the end of that game as well. So the consumer and the fan now is thinking about the whole day and mapping out the whole day, of which an important part of that is the 2-hour window for the game. But either side of that, you need to keep them engaged. You need to look at personalising their experience. And as Ken said, wherever possible, you're looking to maximise existing revenue categories and create new digital revenue categories that keep them tied to the event and continue, funding the team.
Fantastic.
So basically what you guys are saying, the old days of tailgating, it has now evolved into much more of an event-driven spending dollar moment for everybody, which is, to me, incredible.
Well, look, tailgating is a uniquely American thing, and it's great, and I love coming to the States and experiencing that whole thing. In the absence of tailgating in this part of the world, the other bits that surround the venue, and if you think of, what's a local one? If you think of Atlanta Braves and the Battery with SunTrust Park, that's kind of the model that we worked on with them, but that's the model that down here, in many cases, and in Japan, when we're working with major professional baseball teams, these ball teams are building stadiums, but they're surrounding them with hospitality, entertainment, and so forth. So it's no longer about I'm investing in a stadium, I'm investing in a precinct that's going to be 7 by 24 almost in some cases, open to the public.
Yeah, I mean, you remember what they used to tell us, Manny, back, in our experiences in Europe. They were like, well, guys, here's how people consume a game. They go to the local pub, they stay until 15 minutes before the match starts. They all exit out of the pub, they run through the concourse down to their seats and get in position for when that whistle blows. So, guys, it's a habit. This is what people do in Europe, and they're not going to change. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I agree, that's a habit. But I don't agree with the fact that that's always going to be the case. In fact, you have to do something different in order to change a habit, right? You have to encourage them. If I think about what some of these newer venues that we've been engaged with and had the ability to work with, where they're taking the broadcast feed and they're pushing it out in 4K and in some cases 8K. And you imagine these video walls that are set up, 9 screen by 55 inches, and you're pushing 4 or 8K content of the player in real time. I'm pretty sure that somebody isn't going to run right past that screen and right down to their seat. In fact, I think that they might get out of their seat a little bit earlier and get it up to your concourses and drink your beer and eat your food if you're delivering that type of experience. Sure. And so when we talk about change, we talk about just that. I mean, you have to do something to get people to change the habits they're in. And I think that delivering these type of world-class broadcast experiences will be the key to changing that behavior. It might take some time, but I believe that's going to be the key to do it.
Awesome. This is probably a great time just to remind everybody that this is podcast number 1 in a 5-part series all about sports media and entertainment. So if you've heard anything so far that has made you think of a few questions, hang on, because we've got some more in the series, and we're going to take a deep dive into a lot of the topics these guys are touching on now.
Man, so in my mindset, we'll just kind of redo that conversation a little bit. Are there firms, are there industries around just the broadcasting aspect that an Amazon Prime would come in and buy their services? Is that how it works?
You mean specific to the broadcast equipment that's bumped into a venue?
Yeah.
Look, I'm sure there's a number of production companies who specialize in this that they contract. Possibly they're considering building out their own capability. I'm just not sure. Yeah. But I would imagine in the first instance that they'd be looking at contracting existing production companies. We've seen it happen down here to a smaller extent. The Australian Rugby Union is only available on over-the-top services now through Stan. You can't see it on free-to-air, and you can't see it on Fox Sports on cable. So if you want to watch what they call Super 15 rugby, which is the highest level of professional rugby beneath international rugby, you need to subscribe to Stan and Stan Sport, and only then can you see that sport. So I would imagine it's a similar thing. I wouldn't have thought Stan would have gone out and created their own production company. Of course, they hire commentators and they hire technical experts and the people that call the game. But I would have thought they'd contract a production company who specialises in bumping in and bumping out all the equipment needed to call a game.
Thanks, Matty.
I think everybody's identified that there's big money to be made on services, right? And I think it gets back to a SaaS model that every business in the world is after, right? Some kind of reoccurring revenue stream, and it's based off of content. So if you have the content that's there that people want to see, they're willing to pay the subscription price for it. So you think about it in venue now, back to your question earlier, Gary. I mean, like the cameras that were located in these venues would record the event. They would feed that broadcast to the truck. The truck would send it out. The overlays would get put on the screen. So all of us sitting at home see the the first down marker, the how much time's left in the game, that kind of thing. Every camera now is encoded and put on the network as an IP address, and therefore every camera is addressable, right? And so not only have you the ability to capture creative content that you never could before, you can make that content available. And so companies come in and they buy that content and they say, I want to possess it, I'm going to charge a fee for it, right? And that's how this model of a recurring software, as a service, type of over-the-top streaming service is becoming the key to everybody. I mean, look, you had Disney to do it to begin with. Now everybody and the grandmother is got. I'm thinking about creating my own service, right? I just don't have good content. That's all I'm missing. But certainly somebody wants to pay me monthly for seeing my face.
So, Ken, you touched on something there, talking about we talked earlier about all the data points. You talked about all the various cameras that are now endpoints on the network. And immediately I start thinking, well, there's a huge strain as we're adding all these cameras, as we're adding all of these people coming into the venues, all these touch points. What from a technology perspective, what should these owners of these venues be thinking of as they're adding all of this to the fan experience?
I'll kick it off and I'll let Manny join in. There's a couple of different ways to think about this. One is have a major revenue source for these venues and these teams is advertisement, sponsorship activation. It happens in racing. It happens in professional sports. Tying your brand to a specific team or a league is really important. Why? Because they believe that the loyalty that exists in the world of sports can somehow influence somebody to buy or allocate their dollars, their hard-earned dollars, to your product. Things have changed, though, right? I mean, you think about just from the sponsors themselves. It's no longer association game, right? It's no longer seeing golden arches and going, somebody's going to go buy a Big Mac, right? You somehow have to measure your effectiveness of marketing your brand nowadays. And so all these CMOs of all these different big companies that are spending big dollars with, whether it be NASCAR or whether it be professional sports league, somehow have to prove back to their own board that the way that they're spending and marketing their brand is effective. And so you'll see the way in which in venue marketing your brand is going to change, and it's going to change significantly, so much so that there needs to be some kind of measurement whether your brand campaign is effective or not. Cisco has been ahead of this game, I think, in many ways, in which we said, hey, look, when you're converting to IP for a broadcast over IP, and you're enabling somebody that's in a venue to be able to click on different cameras and experience the game different ways. The way that we were able to prove this back to the ownership of these clubs and the ownership of these venues, whether it be private or government, is there's a revenue stream here that if you can capture somebody's attention watching the game from a screen, and you put content on top of that. Not the way that we can control the content and how it flows through these screens has shown a significant way in which you can enable a sponsor to market their brands. So much so that you can do it in different ways. I mean, if you're broadcasting, you're placing your ad on a screen at the beginning of the game versus the end of the game, or in the middle of the game, and some kind of call to action. These are ways in which we're enabling these venues to go back and prove to these sponsors that they've partnered with how effective their brand campaign is. Right, and now you get it at home, right? Something pops up on your screen, says, don't forget to watch this or buy this or whatever. It's not your traditional advertisement anymore. Why? Because people are skipping through the ads, you know what I mean? So now we have to broadcast these advertisements on top of the content, and that's something that Cisco's been doing for a decade now.
Absolutely. The same down here, in fact. So if you think about the model down here, the state government or the local government builds a stadium, and the stadium is effectively the landlord. And so they go out and they sign hiring agreements with professional teams. The professional teams are bound by certain rules and certain restrictions around share of voice with the league, because if Coca-Cola is the sponsor of the league, I can't be signing a deal with Pepsi and all that stuff. So if you think about that whole patch quilt of share of voice and exclusion zones and entitlements from a marketing perspective, you then have to convince a company to invest. Investing in share of voice for in-field LED is quite easy because they know how many people watch the broadcast, and there's a whatever they use, CPM or whatever they use to convert that into this how many people are going to watch the game, this how many minutes you're going to have share of voice and so forth. We now gave them 10 years ago or so the capability, them being the brands, the ability to extend their presence into the bowl, into suites, into the concession stands, through dynamic menu boards and so forth. So there was an education along the way. The education process started through, in fact, construction companies and mechanical engineering companies, convincing them to not run multiple disparate networks, to design one converged IP network and deliver these services over the top of that. And that was a fantastic conversation 10 years ago that we had, and Ken and his colleagues in the States pioneered that when they won the first deals we did back then at MetLife and the Yankees and the Cowboys in 2009, 2010. Fast forward now, that education process continues, and we're educating the brands on the capability of the platforms, the ability to bring together connectivity through Wi-Fi, the digital signage, and the application to deliver a targeted message or opportunity or experience to the fan that's in that venue. So yeah, it has evolved, it continues to evolve. I would say the CMOs now are far more sophisticated and go into these negotiations with the teams or the venue armed with the ammunition and the expectation they have, so they can go back to their respective management, as Ken said, and be able to show a tangible return, be it commercial or customer sat or vendor preference kind of thing, or brand preference. So we're right in all those conversations, which is great. It's not about delivering a box that is quick with some green lights on it. You can tell I'm a sales guy, not an engineer. It's about delivering business outcomes, and we're having far more relevant and deeper business conversations with the sponsors as well now, and arming them and educating them with the knowledge about the power of the platform so they can go back into their negotiations, and vice versa with the teams. And it's really cool. I mean, that's the bit of the job I love, this conversation. How do we take something that's a blank whiteboard like the one behind me and brainstorm and come up with an activation campaign or something that's going to bring to life the brand and make something happen. It's very cool. Very cool time to be in this industry for us.
Very cool. Now you both touched on something, and I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't get an opportunity to chat about it. You talked about advertising, and specifically in the venue, and when you say that, oftentimes the giant rotating boards all throughout the stadium come to mind. And if anybody in our audience has read the blog, hopefully you have already, Ken Martin, the gentleman, put out a blog on this very subject, but I'm going to let him speak on it. Ken, if you want to touch on what's going on with Cisco Vision so that anybody that hears this is up to date on where Cisco's at with that.
You think about the digital signage industry as a whole. It is going to be a $25 billion business in just the next few years. And so, we started this notion in sports simply because of what we just talked about, enabling these teams to increase sponsorship activation. But in reality, what's happening is whether you're in retail or hospitality or transportation, digital marketing is huge. And Cisco was one in that we jumped feet first into this market, I would say 12, 13 years ago. We developed a solution around digital signage, and we've helped hundreds, not measured in tens or hundreds of venues that with this whole notion of how do you monetize through what you're showing on a screen. That decision that we made 12 years ago has not changed. In fact, our executives are more passionate about it today than ever, and certainly our team is more dedicated to this space than ever. What we want to do is we want to accelerate at the pace at which the industry as a whole is going. And so what we've determined is we can't do that internally alone. We need help. We need help with engineers in the development of this. We need new consumption models with regards to how to pay for this type of technology to enable these experiences. We're taking it all into consideration. This will be a key for us and our success moving forward, and more importantly, the success of our customers and our partners. And so we're looking for ways in which we can accelerate that, and we believe that we have found that in partnering with another company to help in our acceleration in this space. And so announcements will be made shortly with regards to what that all means, but we have not wavered in our dedication to this space, because simply we know how important it is to a lot of different companies that we do business with today.
Perfect. And again, one of the announcements that Ken is referencing is a blog written and authored by him. I will link that down below, so if you're interested in reading that or have any further questions, there's a bit more detail in that blog. So guys, one of the things that Gary and I love to do at the very end is somewhat put you on the spot. And what I mean by that is...
well, hold on. What do you mean by end? Like, I thought we still had a couple hours.
Well, we do, but we're kicking Gary off. Ken, don't ruin this.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Sorry. Yes. Of course. Coming to the end. Yes.
So, guys, if you're like me, prepping for this, you probably thought of 3 or 4 things in your mind and assumed certain questions were going to be asked, and you rehearsed what you were going to say to answer those questions in your head. Oftentimes, Gary and I just simply go off script and don't ask you the questions you thought we would. So this is an opportunity for you to leave our audience with that last piece that you feel they need to know and maybe I didn't ask about. So Ken, we'll start off with you. What's the one thing you'd like our audience to make sure they know when they finish up this podcast?
You have a dedicated team that has a lot of industry experience, and I would suggest that you leverage us, not just in the sport and entertainment, even though, our passion, as most people are, 2 common languages that we can share globally are sport and entertainment, from a music. We've spent a lot of time developing this industry, and I feel as though we've played an important role on transforming the industry and what used to be just buy your ticket, go to the event, to how the sport is consumed. And take pride in that, from a Cisco perspective, take pride in that. And know that you have a decade of experience here on the team to help you with these conversations that you'll have with ownership, executives throughout the organization, throughout the league. We've played a significant role here. So there is a team dedicated from sport and entertainment, 100%. But think about some of the things that we've learned and we've developed here at Cisco, for the benefit of a sport and entertainment venue. And we've applied that in other industries, whether it be hospitality, whether it be retail, whether it just be a mall or an airport or a casino. There's a lot of the same care-abouts. From your executives, there's a lot of the same care-abouts, and I think we can help you have those kind of conversations about how they transform their business to capture the fan 2.0, the guest 2.0, and lead them into to the future.
Love it. How about you, man?
Yeah, I agree with Ken 100%.
It's only because you're a team
He's
Not
smart.
necessarily. No, look, I would say exactly the same thing. It's even more relevant and topical now, considering what the world's been through in the last 12 months. Our evolution in our role, from being the stadium guys to being the guys who you come to for any large public venue where there's going to be a significant congregation of people for an extended period of time who need to come in and out safely, and you're looking to consume content, digital content, securely. We have that expertise, and as Ken said, I'm working on a RFP for an integrated entertainment centre. It's a fancy word for a casino they're building. Working on an RFP for a museum. Working on an RFP for a massive airport. Again, the lessons learnt in the last decade are very applicable now across multiple market adjacencies, and they're relevant to Cisco. The question I thought you were going to ask, Danny, on a different note, was something we get told all the time. Do you have the best job in Cisco? And the answer after 11 years is overwhelmingly yes. And it's even getting better, because as the world evolves and as our technology evolves and as our ecosystem partners evolve and emerge with some fantastic ideas, which can only be enabled on a proper converged IP secure network. Yes, it is the best job in Cisco, and the local vice president takes a lot of pleasure in telling me every time I walk by, hey, that's the guy with the best job in Cisco. So yes, it is. It still is, and hopefully will continue to be.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
I mean, it's fantastic. I appreciate both your passions because it's just contagious. And Danny, I can't wait to continue to dive into this. This is like we haven't really kicked off the game yet.
Absolutely.
This is the foundation of our podcast series with this.
Yep, and great segue. Just a reminder again to everybody, this is podcast number 1 in a 5-part series all about sports and entertainment. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. It has been a joy, and I've smiled quite a bit and learned quite a bit, and I think our audience has as well. So thank you both for joining our podcast.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Manny.
Thanks.
Okay.